Well, now let's turn to Father Ron Walters and his video. Phil, if we're ready to run that, of the phase, the third segment of
In
his.
part 3 of this service station build, I will show how I created signs for the building, show how I mounted the signs on the building, and I will show how I assembled the building and installed the doors, windows, and trim to the building. I decided that I wanted my service station to be a Phillips 66 service station. They were dominant in my hometown where I grew up. I went to Google Images and typed in vintage Phillips 66 signs. Please be aware that these images are copyrighted and can only be used for personal use. It is illegal to sell them. I downloaded a variety of images to use on the model. I decided to use Paul's drawing for the placement and sizes of many of the signs. Paul had motor oil signs and tire signs on his drawing. Phillips 66 motor oil, at least where I grew up, was the Trop Arctic brand. So I varied the search of Google Images to find vintage Trop Arctic motor oil signs. I also located some Firestone signs. I downloaded all of these onto my computer, and then I started up Inkscape, a free art type program that you can download and use. And I began loading images of these images into Inkscape. I went to Paul's drawing and measured the sizes of the different signs on his building. And I used Inkscape then to reduce these images to the correct sizes that I needed for my building. I also created some signs to replace some of Paul's signs on the service station. I thought it might be nice to include signs inviting the motorist to trust the auto repair service at the station. These were very small to fit in the recessed spaces on the garage door. I saved the file and printed the sheet of paper using the best setting on my printer. I did not spray these with a fixative before deciding to mount them because I forgot to do so. I will spray the entire building with a matte fixative spray in the process of weathering the building before applying the alcohol and India ink wash so that the colors don't bleed. The next step is placing the signs on the building. To do so, you have to decide, first of all, whether the signs will be painted on the sides of the building or mounted in some way on the side of the building. I decided that the painted on signs would be the larger signs on the building, and that the smaller ones would be ceramic or metal type of signs. To prepare the signs to make them look like they were painted onto the walls, I cut out large sections of the original printed sheet and began sanding the back side of the paper. This takes patience. Don't try to rush the process. I used a standing sponge, as you can see in the photograph. If you look carefully, you will see that one of the two images, the one on the right, is beginning to show through the back side of the paper. The other to the left is only partially showing through. The thinner you can get the paper, the more it will settle down into the textured wall and look painted on. If you wear through the sign in the process of sanding, all is not lost. First of all, you can print another copy of the paper of the signs, and of course, you may wish to leave the tear or the worn through area to make the sign look like it's older and more worn. The smaller signs I decided to glue to index cards using Elmer's Glue-All glue stick. I weighted them down as they dried so that they would remain flat. In this photo, you can see some of the painted on signs already attached to the side walls. You can also see a collection of Vallejo rust paints that I thought I would use to weather these metal signs. However, I decided to use craft paints instead, since the set shown is not cheap, and I want to keep the cost of the kit as inexpensive as possible. I used raw sienna, burnt sienna, and burnt umber to rust the signs. I used a very fine brush to dot on the burnt umber on the sides of the signs where the rust had been for a very long time. I used the raw sienna and burnt sienna with a little water to streak the rust down the signs as though rain has begun to rust them. While on the card, before you cut them out, they don't look like much and they don't look good. But once you cut the signs off the index cards and mount them to the side walls, they look very good. Here are all the walls and extra signs that I produced. Some of them have been mounted, some of them are not. And all of the metal signs have been rusted. The walls are ready for assembly into a building. But before assembling the walls, test fit them. Always test fit before gluing. The garage door has the clear plastic mounted behind the door to simulate the windows. The windows and doors will be mounted after the walls have been assembled. Note that trim has been applied around the bathroom doors and around the garage door. I began the assembly by gluing together the wall with the garage door and the back wall. I used squares to make sure that the walls were aligned correctly. You can use the squares on your cutting mat for this, or use metal machinist squares or drafting squares to align the walls. I used the squares on my cutting mat since I was trying to build this building using what someone might have at home. Next, I glued the wall with the bathroom doors to the back wall, again using the squares on my cutting mat. I used the tackiest glue I had to do this, but you can use regular Elmer's glue all. Apply the glue sparingly and hold the walls together until the glue begins to harden before trying to move the building. I have found that gluing one set of two walls together and leaving them alone, once aligned properly, then walking away and doing something else for about a half hour usually lets the glue dry sufficiently before attempting to attach another wall. Make sure that you glue the back wall to the side walls and not the side walls to the back wall. What I mean is that the back wall should fit between the side walls. If you do not do this, when you do the next step of gluing the front walls in place, your building will not be square. Remember, I mentioned that the gabled walls have to fit between the side walls on this model. That was the easy part. Now comes the hard part, gluing the front walls between the side walls. I started with the full front wall. Glue it between the side walls so that the front wall meets the side walls at the corners, as in the photo. Once it is dry, then glue the short front wall in the same way between the front ends of the two side walls. After these had dried, I then tried to put the roof of the filling area between the two front walls. This took some work since the fit was too tight. You can see in the photo that what happened was that it spread the short front wall apart at the front. I ended up sanding the roof of the filling area a bit before it would drop into place. In this photo, you can see that I have mounted all the doors and windows. I have also added a ridge pole from the front of the building to the back, which will help in the mounting of the roof. I've also found a piece of cereal box cardboard, which will help me plan the driveway around the building. In addition to what you see here, I have blackened the back side of the garage windows and put blinds made from an old manila envelope behind the front and side windows. I have also added corner trim to the corners where the back wall and side walls meet. The trim was made using index card and the method I described in making clapboards in part 1. I measured 2 3-millimeter marks on each side of the index card. Using a second 6-inch ruler, I lightly scored the first set of markings, and I cut the second set of markings, then folded this strip of index card down the scored center line. I attached the trim to the building, then painted it to match the other trim on the building. This brings me to the end of part 3. In part 4, I will cover putting a roof on the building, adding trim under the roof on the front and the back of the building. I will add an island where the roof supports over the filling area are, and the gas pumps, which can be mounted later. Finally, I will create the driveway around the building, which can be used as a template for mounting the finished product on a layout.
Well, thank you so much to Father Ron for that. And like I say, he'll be back next week. But if you have any questions about this or anything, please send him an email, and I'm sure that he'll be most happy to respond to you.